and welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving.
No.
In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection.
Hmm.
This week, our guest is Dr. Terence Chatmon, founder of Victorious Family and author of Do Your Children Believe. He is joining us to discuss how discipleship starts at home. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Now, Don, when you said victorious family, I was thinking, who is Victoria, and why is
Well, I think he is. I do. Yeah.
I thought you said Victoria as okay. Well, anyways, greetings from sunny Florida, where what are we doing here? The palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience, but it should be yours, the Bible Buffet. Our regular legal disclaimer: our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, Dr. Thomas Chatmon, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. I hope I turned the button on, Don. This is that time in the show where I wonder if I did it right. Our regular announcements: notice the opinions expressed in this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it, or if it annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to, and as you do, remember, this webcast is Y2K compliant, and don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now, let's see if I click the button so that we can hear the fake applause for Dr. Terence Chatmon. Are you hearing it?
Wow, what a receptance.
What's that? Oh, yes or no? Hello. Don, you're not answering my question.
I didn't hear your question. We can hear it just fine.
Okay, that was my question. Apparently, I was just overwhelmed by the fake applause. So, yes,
it worked.
We can fake sincerity here.
It worked fine. And we have this disclaimer on because sometimes we don't know if the guest is going to have a sense of humor at all, and frankly, we don't care.
We put the disclaimer up there just to show how little we care. But
right.
But we have to have the lawyers at Dewey Cheatham and how they made sure that we put that up there.
It's important. Discipleship, one of my favorite topics. Discipleship. I want to start off reading a little thing here. Dr. Chatmon, you and I were kind of talking about this before we got started, and that is, I think many today in the church have a incorrect idea of what discipleship is, or some idea that you get a book that has maybe 9 sessions in it. You meet with somebody for 1 hour a week for 9 weeks, and now they're discipled, and you send them off on their way. So I look back and I said, okay, is my idea of discipleship the correct one, or a good, reasonable facsimile of what it is? And one of the things that came up, Doug Greenwald, who does a good thing on discipleship in the early church, and Jewish believers particularly, and he says this: emulation, while not overtly required, disciples invariably had a deep desire to emulate their rabbi. This often included imitating how the rabbi ate, observed Sabbath, what he liked and disliked, as well as his mannerisms, prejudices, and preferences. And some disciples would go to extreme lengths to try to imitate their rabbi. So they tried to conform and become like their rabbi in all respects. We sort of see that with the 12 who followed Jesus. It was more than just 9 hours of here's what a disciple is. It was walking with him, living with him, eating with him, uh, understanding how he thought about the world and emulating that. One of my contentions is all of us are discipling all the time, whether we realize it or not, because others are observing, picking up, and imitating what we believe and how we act. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
No, I believe that's true. And just what a great joy it is to be here as well. It's an everyday act, right? So when I think about Ken Blanchard had produced a book many years ago, Situational Leadership. And he talked about how do we get to the second floor in his model. And his model talked about we typically will give people directives, and we want people to go follow those directives. And then he says we move to a position of coaching, and then we move to the second floor where we're supporting, and then we move to where delegation. Well, the one institute that really fails that model more than ever is the church. We like to go from directive straight to delegation, and sometimes we think that's discipleship. Here's 6 weeks of training, as you say, and so you should be an expert in discipleship, right? But in reality, as Hebrews 6:1 says, sometimes we start with the milk, right? We start on milk, and all of a sudden he says, we got to get to some meat. And the meat is the everyday life where it's kind of a sanctification, it's a process where we're becoming more and more holy and righteous every day. But it's through our disciplines. It's making and training disciples both, right? And some people separate it. It's just the training of them. But we have to train disciples. We have to make disciples on an everyday basis through prayer, through God's word, through worship, but through our everyday modeling of life. Because nowadays, especially, this next generation, they're watching more of what we do, more so than what we say. And if we don't match that modeling with our words, they say, "Hey, I need to remove myself from the situation." So it's very important how we model our words today more than ever.
Yeah. Now, to go back a couple of steps, then, now that I've kind of launched into the middle of what we're going to talk about, what got you interested in start? Did you wake up one morning and say, "I need to start an organization about discipleship in the home"? How did this all develop?
It's 26 years ago. We weren't thinking about an organization. My wife and I was off on a vacation. Our regular retreat we used to take once a year on one another, and we've been married 40 years now. My wife from college sweetheart, and 3 kids, wonderful kids, all know the Lord, but they were between the age of 10, 15 years of age, and we just went off, and I had this beautiful 3-question plan for our anniversary trip. It was just amazing. Kind of where we've been in that 10 years that we were together, and where we're going, or where are we and where we're going. And so the question came up: are the children prepared to defend their faith after high school? They knew the Lord, and we had heard all these crazy stats. 75% of our high school students walking away from the church after high school, and we didn't want to be a part of that statistic. And our response came back after some conversations that they were not prepared to really defend their faith and have maturity. And maybe the secular world would have an impact on their life greater than when we would like. And so her response was, well, what are you going to do about it? You're supposed to be the spiritual leader of the home. You had abdicated that to the church and to me, and it's time you step up, buddy, and take your rightful role here. And that's how we got started. It was a need for me to be the spiritual leader in my home, that I had abdicated that. Now remember, I'm the youth director here. I had abdicated that to the church and to my wife. And here's what the fact is: 83% of Christian parents feel totally inadequate to raise their kids in the Lord. And that's why we abdicated to schools and camps and the church, because we feel that we're not adequate.
Right.
But the fact is, we should be the primary disciple of the child. I say it should be home-centered and church-supported. But if we don't practice this at home, which we have the kids majority of the time, or we should, whoever that caregiver is, whether it's a grandparent, the single parent, or traditional husband and wife, whatever it may be, we are the primary discipler of our child. And I'll take it simply this way. what drew me to all of this when I looked at it is there could have been many places for me to go, Deuteronomy, so many places, but I landed on Ephesians 6:4. It says, fathers, really speaking to parents, don't exasperate your child. I was getting a good grade in there like Ron was. But it says to what? Train and instruct your children in the Lord. Well, that's family discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
we have a responsibility to be intentional as parents. And so that started our journey some 20 some years ago. And by the way, Ron and Don, we still do our family devotionals today. And my kids are in their 30s
Hmm.
with their spouses every other Sunday from 8:30 to 9:30. It has been nonstop from elementary school, high school, college, young adult, and now married.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I tend to think this is, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, I am wondering if homeschoolers tend to do a better job of discipling their children than non-homeschoolers. I don't know. It's just a question.
I don't know. Here's what I do know. Parents who are intentional, that 75% number who's leaving the church after high school, it flips it on its head. 90% of our students stay connected, walking in the spirit after in the church, et cetera, after high school. So there's something to be said for those who are being intentional. Now, let me disclaimer: you can do all the perfect things. You can do everything right. You can pray with your children. You can go to church with your children. You can do all those things. Be the best Christian in the world. But the fact of the matter is, it's a personal relationship. It's not grandfathered in. It's not grafted in. It's a personal relationship, and it's a relationship between the father and whoever the individual may be.
Yeah.
The question that we wanted to pursue is that they would know who Christ is, and they would fall madly in love with who he is and what he's done. That was
Right.
our objective, was to take them back to the cross, not take them back to the Terence Chatmon model.
Yeah. Well, that kind of goes along with your book here. Let me see if I can bring that up so the people are aware of that. And we have a link to this down in the description. Do your children believe? So as we kind of get into this, why should someone who's viewing this consider purchasing this book? How does it help them? Other than the great question.
Well, it's a great question. And think about how you would define, quote unquote, the success of parenting. At the end of the day, you have a responsibility to raise your child. What a privilege that is. Let's say you give them all of the wonders of this world that can be offered, and yet they don't have eternal life. You've never shared the gospel message with them in a way that they would ask questions and inquire and say, who is this Jesus? And a lot of times our children are hearing this for the first time in Christian camps at 18 years old or 16 years old or college or whatever. The ultimate question at the end of the day is, do your children believe? Do your children believe? And more importantly, because you don't have the power to transform,
Right.
but you do have the privilege and honor to share who he is and what he's done. Have you intentionally done that? Have you prioritized it? Or have you taken the time on Saturday to take them to the greatest sports events and soccer tournaments and all those other things that's distracting us from Christianity? Are you prioritizing secular, or are you prioritizing sacred? Do your children believe is the ultimate question we must respond to as parents.
Right. Right. Now I was interested in, you're talking about your family devotionals. And we talked about that a little bit before we started, because I find that there are those who effectively disciple their children, and they do it through different ways.
Absolutely.
Um, the way they live, the lifestyle they have. My kids grew up, when I mentioned, my kids grew up basically in a home of two apologists. And so we interacted with culture in a lot of different ways. If uh, I, I remember there was a television show, Three is Enough. Three is Enough. Oh,
Three is company, I think it
Three's
is.
Company. Thank you. Three's Company.
Eight is
Uh,
enough. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Three's Company. And there was a commercial on, which was a little bit, sexual innuendo about someone kind of cheating on his wife or whatever. And of course, you had the laughter going on with the laugh track, and And my son and his little friend, they were however old they were, they kind of laughed too. And my wife goes, "No, wait a minute. How would you feel if your daddy had an affair on me?" And they both kind of thought about that a minute. Well, then what we discovered is his friend went home and that same commercial came on, and her little brother started laughing, and she goes, "Wait a minute, what would have? How would you feel if our dad had?" And he went, "Oh, they're getting it, but they're getting it by how we ask questions, live our lives. We prayed every night. We had dinner together. We'd go through kind of here's what your day, what do we need to pray for, and then we would pray with and for each other. That was just part of our process every night at dinner, and they basically became apologists and defenders of the faith by observing and imitating what we were doing. It's a little different than some of the church's recommendations on how to do family altar, but that's just how we did it.
Well, what you're mentioning is very important. One, you were intentional, and two, you were consistent. And so I think the consistency is what's important. The methodology can shift from family to family based on age and stage of maturity. In other words, think about it. What we're saying is simply this: whatever methodology you use, you have to be intentional about it. And the fact is, if you write it down, you get it done. There was a study done years ago by Harvard. Yale say they did it. Harvard say they did it. Who knows? We'll just give both credit. That for those students who went through university and wrote down their goals, they achieved 83% greater than anyone who did not. Those who don't write down their goals and just kind of go through life, and about 3% achievement. And so what we do know is that if you write things down, they get done. If you don't write things down, they don't get done. The other things that Christians do so popular is that we, especially in churches, we're guilty of this, is that we will shoot an arrow and move the bullseye and celebrate. Versus the hard part is to define the bullseye and then shoot the arrow.
Yeah, right.
And that's parents. And so parents, at the end of the day, we have to have a vision statement, if you will. That vision statement defines our destiny. And so if we don't define our destiny, then we're just going wherever the wind blows. But if we define our destiny, which takes discipline, then we have to define our values. What's really mission critical? What's our values? And how do we get there, which is our mission in essence. So if we don't have a clear vision, a clear mission with clear values and clear milestones, hey, if I go from Atlanta to Chicago, how do I know I'm on the right track? How do I know I'm on the right road? How do I know I'm not going 40 miles out of the way? Well, there's mile markers that tell me the best route. There's a GPS system that tells me. Well, as parents, we're doing the same thing. What life do we want our children to have when they're 21 years old? And it starts early in the home.
Right.
We have to define our destiny. And he has already defined that for us, that we would come to know who he is and fall madly in love with Christ Jesus and what he's done.
Now, would that include, I'm taking my hand a little bit, would that include kind of training your kids to always ask the why questions pretty much in everything? Not just why is there air, but why should I believe in the doctrine of the Trinity? Or why should I believe what the pastor says? Or why should I embrace whatever the current popular view is out in culture? Is that a healthy thing to keep asking why?
Man, I love the why question. And the reason that you have to have the why question, see, a lot of times we want to dictate and tell. Well, in reality, what we want is investigation. We want our children to be able to investigate the faith on their own, not us tell them what the faith should be.
Right.
You know, it's like we don't want your old father's Chevrolet. There's a new Chevrolet here. There's a Tesla now. And so the idea is help them to investigate the faith, not tell them what their faith should be. And the why question is critical. I believe it's the why, is the how, and so forth. But the why question, we need our kids asking that question, why? 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 Now, here's the key. When they ask that question, why, we have to be prepared to lead them and direct them to the answer to the why. Not give them the answer, but to lead and direct them to the why.
And sometimes we won't have the answer, which means that together we can ferret out what the answer is.
And that's where the church is coming in along with the home, and we're providing. Now, we can't even see the pin dot of our knowledge. I mean, when we look at the universe and the omnis of God, and the knowledge of God, of course, we just have 66 amazing books. We don't have the vastness of his knowledge. We just have a little peek at it. And so who are we to rely on for that knowledge? It's not us. It's the power of the Holy Spirit that indwells in us. And we have to be able to say, through prayer, through God's word, through worship, you will seek those answers, but also in life. And so it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, let's go to God's word and figure it out. Let's ask him, right? Let's make a telephone call called prayer and communicate with the God himself, who will reveal his word to us in a clear way.
So wouldn't it be the case that in our discipling our children and others, that it is more, as you pointed out, than just communicating information, but also demonstrating how to find out other information? What are the tools I need to get through life, which become transferable, not just for the faith, but to my job, to my relationships with others. And so the discipleship of how to do stuff is just as important sometimes as the end answer to particular questions.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to put it into a system, because every
Okay.
successful organization person, that you really have a system. You may not realize you have a system, but you do. And in this system, there's a 3C methodology. We use a system of connection. Year one is about connection. The first phase is connection. It's relational. It starts with a relationship. Everything starts with the relationship, one with the Father and with one another. And if that relationship is tethered in any way, is broken, now you have some challenges. So it starts with connection. The second phase of this, or second year, we want you on commitment. It's living out that spirit-filled life. It's the things that you're talking about, modeling that behavior, living that behavior. The year of commitment, okay? Now that third year is the year of commission, because it's not just self-maturity and self-absorbing. He gave us a challenge of the Great Commission. It's not just for us. You see, he wants us to know him, to grow in relationship with him, to that intimacy with him. Yes, that's the connection, commitment, to live out that spirit-filled life. But the third year is very critical, and that is the year of commission. We are now to train our kids on how to go share that gospel message with others. And if we lose that piece, and by the way, less than 3% of Christians know how to share their faith.
Right.
So when we look at this is not just self-absorbing. We're not to be a consumer here all the time. We are to learn and be able to model and demonstrate this on our own as well. How do we teach our kids about intercessory prayer? How do we teach our kids how to share the gospel message? So one, remember the year of connection, commitment, commission. And if you put your kids on the pathway of the 3 C's, I can assure you that they will leave your home stronger and mature than if you don't be intentional around that. And use that prayer, reading God's word, and worship. And here's our last challenge, Don and Ron. Less than 10% of Christians read that Bible on a regular basis.
Right.
And I tell you, if you're not discipling your child, the world is.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how many of you, whether you're familiar with Ray Vanderloon's ministry. He had a video series that was put out by Focus on the Family. I'm trying to remember the name of it. In the Steps of the Master or something like that. But he would take these regular trips to the Holy Land, and as you watch his video, you can see some of them were made when he was younger and some of them were made when he was older. So he's taking these people through the Holy Land. One of the basic premises of all of his videos is that Jesus didn't teach in a classroom setting. He
Right.
taught like a typical rabbi, which means that his disciples lived with him and they could observe his behavior, and that was part of the discipleship. So there was the verbal transmission of information, but then there was also just the modeling of behavior. And it makes me think of Hebrews chapter 13. The author says two things. In verse 7, he says, remember your leaders, or remember those who had the rule over you, who spoke to you the word of God. And he says, consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. And he says that first before 10 verses later, using the same word for leaders. He says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls. So the first thing you do, you observe them. You do that to make sure really that these are people worth obeying. That these are people worth giving you guidance in your Christian life. I don't think the obedience here is the kind of command and control type of
Right.
obedience. It's
Authoritarianism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah. Well,
it's
Ron, what you're speaking to is something I adhere
Mhm.
to. What you're really speaking to, we form up as life on life discipleship,
Mhm.
where one life is imparting another's life into another life. And that's what you're speaking to. And parents, you see, that's one of our challenges
Yeah.
yeah,
is
Right.
that we are not imparting our life into our children's lives. And we're allowing the secular world, the world, whether it be TikTok and Instagram and all of these things are imparting life into our kids'
yeah.
life. And they're accepting that as truth.
And one of the problems I think we have is because I think all discipleship is like this.
Yes,
In other words, it's not just the discipleship we're trying to instill in our families,
that's right.
but in our churches as well. And
Right.
if one of the things we're trying to teach families within our churches is what you're saying here, uh, life on life discipleship, then we need to model that for the families. In other words, we need to model all aspects of discipleship. We need to spend time with each other. And that means families need to spend time with other families. Um, the more mature families that have been in the Lord longer, where this is being practiced, that they need to kind of just be there with them and show them how. I really kind of pull back a little bit on trying to program this. Maybe some churches are successful at that. I don't want to take anything away from that, but I think just do it. Just if you don't have a program, just be that older family that is mature and invite the younger family over to share time together, and they can see how you have devotions, how you live together, and then also supplement. Make sure that is also being taught. That the elements of that, the essential elements, are being taught.
I agree with you. And I would just simply say this that is a program.
It
Uh,
is in a way, yeah.
right. And so, one thing I certainly agree. We don't need more programs. Churches have about 5 million programs that they've
Yeah.
run.
Exactly. Yeah.
What you're talking about is very much what Jesus did. Jesus he found some vagabonds out there and he says, hey, follow me, walk with me. These weren't the Pharisees of the world. These weren't the religious leaders of the world. These were the fishermen and the tax collectors and all these guys. And I just loved his methodologies. Just follow me and I'll show you things that you'll never see in your life. And they just experienced life with Jesus.
Yeah.
When he spoke to the everyday man, he talked in parables, but when he talked to them, he explained what those parables meant.
One of the things that we are up against is because the church has an hour to 3 hours a week, basically, to do some form of training. Uh, the families and the world around them, especially social media today, has the rest of the week to influence their worldview. The result is they sort of pick and choose what they're going to believe about the faith. And sometimes they just choose really bad doctrine along the way because it's sort of popular. Maybe it was on TikTok or something. One of our sponsors kind of talked to this issue.
Yeah, well, we have a question here. Are you tired of hearing all about the difference between the milk of the word and the meat of the word? Are you wondering when your church is going to get around to serving the ice cream and cheesecake of the word? Does your pastor take that whole Bible thing way too seriously? Well, then you need to check out the Bible Buffet. It's not your father's worship experience. Everything at the Bible Buffet is prepared, with your comfort and enjoyment in view. Everything there is gluten-free, trans fat free, and truth claim free, and all their dishes are piping hot and ready to eat. And even during COVID times, they're always open thanks to Bible Buffet Carryout. The regular Sunday specials are Aryan appetizers, Sibelian succotash, Galatian goulash, Gnostic nut salad, Pelagian pie, and Socinian salad. And don't forget that the Bible Buffet is a fully accredited ministry of the Church of Smorgasbordianism. The Bible Buffet, it's not your father's worship experience, but it should be yours. So check it out.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to kind of launch off from that to pose maybe another question to you is this. Because I think the church is being, as you pointed out, you kind of shoveled it off to the church to do that task and then realized, oh, wait a minute, I really have to do this. I have to head this up. There's my support structure, but I have to do the basic work in the home to disciple my kids. And we now are seeing a larger movement of those who are deconstructing from the faith. And as I look at the reasons for deconstructing, I discover they were not really well discipled into the faith when they were younger. And so many times they're deconstructing from things that we don't believe anyway. So, and in my opinion, this is going to get worse. I just did a study. We wrote on this last week, I think. Something like 94% of our culture, this is not the church directly, but our culture, which at one time had a basically Judeo-Christian worldview, do not have a Judeo-Christian worldview at all. It's only 4% of our culture today that has a Judeo-Christian worldview. That means the church is not having a serious impact on the culture in which we live. That also means our children are not really being discipled into the faith either. Instead, they're being discipled by culture, social media, progressive media, those kinds of things. So, what is it that you're proposing that those in the homes who are now two parents doing full-time jobs plus raising the family, how do they do this home discipleship stuff?
Man, you hit the nail right on the head. We think biblical worldview is the key issue. Back when builder generation, it was a 65% of Americans would say they had a biblical worldview. They would be evangelical, and they could explain that. That significantly dropped in the boomers generation. It dropped to 35%, 50% shift. Things happened during that generation that changed the very fabric of America. Then it went on, you teach what you don't know what you teach, and next thing, the next generation's impacted. The Gen X generation, it fell to 16% biblical worldview. Millennials dropped again to about 8%. Now we're looking at 4 to 6%. But here's the key: when we look at Gen Z out the millennial, 1 to 2% of our Gen Z population have a biblical worldview. They see things.
They have what now? Have relations with what?
Only about 1 to 2% have a biblical worldview.
Okay.
So when they look at things, when I talk about biblical worldview, it's your view of how you see God, the world, and yourself. And when you look at that in a different lens from a biblical standpoint versus a secular standpoint, you make decisions based on secular versus based on truth. And now we can justify almost anything and make it sound good, right? My truth becomes my truth. Yours become your truth. We all have right for truth. And Next thing we know, we have no truth. But at the end of the day, there's good news because we always talk about this. So here's my idea. We have missed the over the last, I believe, 2 to 3 generations. This is not a new problem. This is
Right.
a problem that has been brewing for quite some time. This has been the perfect storm. We've taken God out of the schools. We've taken God out of our culture. We've taken God even out of the churches in some cases. Only 47% of our youth pastors have a biblical worldview.
Right.
So we have an issue here all the way around. So I believe the key is this: parents, we must be the primary discipler of our children. Whatever methodology, I don't care, but on a regular basis, you must be intentional in teaching God's word and praying together and reading his word and talking about his word and living out this and being very intentional in defining it. And here's the key to it. Our children are thirsty for this knowledge. They're thirsty for this relationship. And the fact of the matter is our relationships are broken. And we've abdicated this because we feel inadequate. And our churches have to get back to training parents on how to disciple their kids. And if they don't, then our parents will they're trying to do the best they can. I'll give you a story. You know, when I was growing up, I went to church. My parents are very active in church. My grandparents, everyone went to church. In fact, we didn't go to church on Sunday. We went to church, I think, every day but Friday. Friday was
Really?
fish fry. There was nothing else to do on Sunday. I mean, there was nothing open. There was nowhere to go. There was no sports. So there was respect for Sunday and the Sabbath. And so I just remember sitting around the coffee table with my parents and my siblings. And we had a 50-ton Bible. It was probably 11 by 7. And of course, it had to be the old King James version. So we understood every other word that they were
Right,
talking.
right.
But we flip that thing and we just we'll talk about it and we talk about what the pastor just talked about. And we have a conversation as a family around the table around what's happening here, what this book is saying. Well, sometime, we need to get back to the Vince Lombardi's way of coaching. We need to hand up and say, this is a football.
Right.
This is his truth. And stop trying to make it all fancy and people dropping down from ceilings and smokes and lights and all this other stuff. Just make it simple. Just keep it simple. Here's God's word. Here's his truth. And let's talk about him. Let's talk about the world. Let's talk about you and how you fit in. And he says something I believe is very appropriate. Is in Psalms 8:3. He says, when I look at your heavens and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. Well, who is this you? We got to talk about that. He says, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. We have been crowned with glory and honor through the Son, because of the Son. And we don't know who this Son is. So for me, my parenting and my suggestion is, regardless of what methodology you use, take them back to the cross. Take them back to the person of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. If we're going to fail at parenting, we're going to do all the dumb stuff. But if we are successful in taking our kids back to the Christ, to the relationship, I guarantee you, we will not fall short.
We live in now. You haven't really read our blogs or journals or anything like that, but we have written a lot about demonstrating that the time we live in today is more like the first century than really any time in between. And I think too many Christians don't, because for most of us, history goes back about 3 weeks, right? Nothing really happened before 3 weeks ago in the world that was
nothing important. Yeah.
Nothing important. Right?
Nothing worth knowing about.
Exactly. And so I'm shocked at how little people know about history. But in the first 3 centuries of the Christian church, it existed in a pagan culture. And they lived in a world that believed that all truth claims, in fact, a friend of mine put it this way, all truth claims reviewed by the average person is equally true. To philosophers, they were viewed as equally false. And to politicians, they were viewed as equally useful. And so there's kind of a different take on truth claims. But you could believe whatever you wanted, and that was okay. And then we went for, 16, 1700 years where they believed there were absolute truths. That has now changed. Now we've shifted back over the last 150 years to more and more like this pagan culture. I don't think, I was talking with an associate of ours, Carl Tykrip, today. We do things like going to, I don't know, we were just at Paganicon, which is a conference of pagans, witches, druids, and Wiccans. About 1,000 of them gather
John's
each
favorite
year.
people.
It is. I love going to these conferences because many of them grew up in the church, and so I get to talk with them about the faith. And I ask questions. We go to the Parliament of the World's Religions, 8,500, 9,000 people from around the world, and we get to interact with them. When I was talking with Carl today, he was pointing out, and he's going to send me the numbers. I'm trying to do this from memory, but there's something like 800 conferences like that a year in the U.S. You have millions of people that are going to them, and these are um, transformation conferences. They are transforming culture. The things that are being talked about there are AI, transhumanism, all these kinds of things. And we're starting to see this now materialize in the marketplace. These have been talked about for 20 years now in these conferences. Uh, the church does not realize the tsunami of cultural change that is coming on them. They just have no idea. We see this on a regular basis. Now, if the kids are not discipled, they have no defense against what's coming.
That's right. Boy, that's spot on. I mean, this is why I believe we're in the most we're in a critical phase in America where we see moral and spiritual decay greater than. When have we seen children killing children at the
Oh,
at the degree we've seen? When have we seen the type of chaos? Back in the day, if you get into a nice, argument, you might throw some blows or something, but maybe it was radical for someone to pull out a knife or something of that nature. But to see what we're seeing moral and spiritual decay in our land.
yeah.
And so people say, why do we see what we see? Well, because of moral and spiritual decay. And we see that more and more, and the more that we're removed from this truth, the more that we will see a greater moral and spiritual decay in our homes, in our cities, in our communities, and in our nation. And I believe that as that family unit goes in terms of discipling our kids, etc., the nation goes. Because our values are being taught, our values are being modeled, our relationships are developed, our connectivity, especially think about it. When you have absenteeism of who should be the spiritual leader of the home. Wow. Fathers being absent. Moms do, back when I was growing up, mom was at home or whatever, you can call that whatever you may be. I know it's not, but at the end of it, someone was at home. And if
Right,
they weren't at home, your neighbor had permission to be at home.
right,
You were never alone. And so there was always a life imparting another's life into your life
right,
intentionally. So we have to get back to the basics, I believe, where parents are the primary discipler. They must be equipped to be the primary discipler. We must model this behavior. We must be consistent and intentional. And our churches have to take on the responsibility to truly equip and not worry about the ABCs, the attendance, the building, and the cash. We've got to get back to the blocking and tackling.
right. So, as I'm listening to you, I'm going, okay, now I do this already, but I'm going, what if I'm just hearing this and going, okay, I know that I have a responsibility. I, I have so much on my plate, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, yeah.
Where do I get resources even that can gently guide me through the process to at least get started and then see what develops?
Well,
Now,
here's the good news.
yes, that's what I wanted to get to. What's the good
Yeah,
news?
Yeah, we've been at this for 15 years. We've trained over 100,000 parents. We're currently in 39 countries, so we understand culturally, we understand the different generations. We're reaching millennial parents. In fact, I have 3 kids and 9 grandkids, and so we understand the challenges. My youngest has 3 under the age of 4. She has a 4-year-old and a set of twins, and so her day, and she works in corporate America full time, and her husband, fortunately, they can do home and go in as well. But their day is waking up 24/7, caring for those young children. Success to them is they made it through bath time at 8:30, and everyone's still alive. Okay, so I understand the challenges of busyness. We need to flip that and talk about prioritization, because our life is going to remain busy. I mean, it's just the way it is. My daughter does all she can do. Her husband certainly does all he can do. But the fact is, it's a 24-hour gig when you got 3 kids under 4. Okay, so they're at it full time. And I asked them, well, are you going to be intentional to go to church? Are you going to be intentional to talk to them about God? Are you going to be, and they have to be intentional in everyday life, right? Don, that's what you've been recommending, is your life pattern should be the same. It shouldn't be decompartmentalized. It shouldn't be, well, let me put my Christian hat on right now at 12 o'clock. Let me put my secular hat on at 5 o'clock. No, we have to live this life of discipleship every minute of the day. Every moment is a teachable moment. And we prepared resources to help you with these rhythms at our website, victoriousfamily.org. And we have resources to help you as a parent to disciple your child. And we've done this over 100,000 parents over the last 15 years. So resources there. We have a home kit that really walks you through, regardless of the age and stage of your child, because you train a 5-year-old different than a 16-year-old.
Right.
And so we looked at that. What are the necessities, if you will, that you want to cover off between 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15? And let me just quickly say, these are building blocks, okay? And if you miss a building block, you got to make up that building block somewhere, or someone else will fill in that building block. Let me give you a quick example. In 0 to 5, the kid needs love. They need intimacy. They need to know that they're loved. You want to spoil them to death. You want to embrace them. You want to show them intimacy. You want to hug them, kiss them, tell them you love them as many times. There is no, I'm loving them too much. Love them to death. They need love. They need to know that they're loved. Between 6 and 10 years old, they need affirmation. They need purpose. They need to know that they matter. They need to know that you care about them. And they need to know that they matter in this world. And that's why they seek that. When they get a little older, 11 to 15, you know what they need? They need fun and friendship. That's why they gravitate. You're not, they don't want to, the parents, you guys are old already. They need fun. They need friendship. They need connectivity. That's why social media is so popular. It gives them a fake form of friendship, but it's still friendship. It's acceptance.
Right.
And if they missed out on those other 2 building blocks that they love and they're affirmed, now they have to seek it with their friends and their social media platforms. Now, when they get to that adolescence age, I mean, they're acting out already, because now, and it's normal, by the way, between 16 and that young adult, it's normal to reject their parents, because see, you're not cool anymore. You see, the pattern is, when they were young, you were a genius. When they became a teenager, you became a total idiot. The good news is, as a young adult, when they have their first child, you start to become a genius again, because they see what parenting is and how hard it was.
What was it Mark Twain said? Mark Twain said, when I was 18, I thought my dad was the stupidest person on the face of the earth. When I was 20, I was surprised how much he'd learned in 2 short years.
Exactly. And that's the pattern, right? And so we have a short period of window to have influence on our children, in the sense of those early building blocks. But I find that you never stop parenting. As a grandparent, you still parent. You just parent in a different way, right? My kids don't need me to do what I did when they were 5. They're grown now, but they need to know that I'm available, I'm there, I'm present. and I'm with them and I'm loving them. And he gives us the same thing. He says in Matthews that I'm with you even until the end of the days. I'm walking in the Spirit with you. In fact, I'm going to send you a beautiful advocate. I'm going to send you a wonderful counselor. I'm going to send you someone that's testifying to the truth on my behalf. And he indwells in you every day. Our children needs to know that.
Yeah, that's important. Who are you modeling? Because you're always modeling somebody. And
Awesome.
and as you were kind of describing these different phases, I was thinking about my and my wife's relationship with our kids. We had all of us have had unique child raising experiences. Mine is just unique because it sort of fits who we are. And my son, who I love deeply, but he has always been terribly independent. And he would sometimes get into trouble, as teenagers might do, as you have pointed out. And so we trying to figure out, well, how do we protect him from himself? And we realized that punishing him was not helpful because he would just get the punishment over with and go on and do what he's going to do anyway. But we realized that for my son, the most important thing was his social circle. And so if we would, which is what we did, we opened our home to him and all of his friends. We had a shed in the backyard. We said, you guys can have that. No drugs, no sex, blah, blah, blah. But this is yours to hang. So we typically had like Lee and 15 of his favorite friends every day out there. We went through a lot of pizza, a lot of cereal over the years, but we did a couple of things with them that turned out to be very rewarding to us. We called them the burnouts. They called themselves the burnouts. They smoked and they had bad habits and long hair but we started having a Bible study on Sundays. All of them came, had great questions.
Mm-hmm.
One day they decided they wanted to do something for the community. Why? I don't know, but they decided they wanted to go do food collection to get it for the food pantry. And they did that. And then we started getting calls from people saying, if you're going to send them out to collect food, at least get their hair cut. We went, are you kidding? We're glad they want to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And then and as time went on, all of the girls would go inside to talk with Joy about, guess what? Their relationships with their boyfriends.
Mm-hmm.
I'd come home from work and the guys would be sitting on the porch and they would ask me about, guess what? Their relationships with the girls. So we discovered after a little while, we're discipling all of his friends,
Mm-hmm.
and he's home in a safer space because all of his friends are there, and they kind of liked us, even though we were kind of fuddy-duddy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a challenge. That's a challenge to live like that, but it was really rewarding. We're glad we did.
Well, you just described that third phase. I talked about friendship and fun and the connectivity. See, we try to formalize this and make it so difficult. It's just doing life with your children.
Yeah.
And I want to leave with this thought, and I've learned this over the years. There's never a time in the child's life that they don't crave the love of the father. Guys, they crave the love. They innately, they kind of get the mother's love for the most part, but they crave the love of the father. And dads, I want to speak to you directly, because if you are a father, your child crave you. They crave your love. They crave your acceptance. They crave your affirmation. And dads, we can no longer abdicate and be absent. We have to be present. Even if you're a terrible dad and you think you're a terrible dad, let me tell you, you're not.
Right.
If you're just present, your child, it will beam with joy because they need you. I don't know which, we're just fuzzy duzzies, I don't even know why. But when the dad connects with the child, life changes.
Yeah.
So, Dad, there's never a moment in a child's life that they don't crave your love and acceptance and affirmation. So be present. Be present.
Be present. So if a church wants to make contact with you, would you travel and speak and kind of have a program to say, not a program, a way to communicate this to a church body, either on a Sunday morning or over a weekend, maybe something like that?
Oh, absolutely. We have worked with over 20,000 churches so far over the last 15 years. We work with the church and integrate what they're doing and support what they're doing. But we also have a process that we talk about, and it's training. One of first is training what we call master family champions within the church to be the disciple. We don't add more stuff to the pastor. The pastor's job is not to do
Right.
this.
Right.
They have to prove it and look at it and so forth. But we want to help them train leaders within the church. That's the first thing through our Master Family Champion program. We help them set up a prayer process. We start with prayer, by the way, everything we do. And then our master, and then we have, if they want, we have a 1-day workshop for parents. We train parents on this process of how to be intentional and why it's important and so forth, and give them tools and resources to get them started, right? 7-day prayer guides and devotional guides and rhythm guides and biblical worldview discussion. So everything is centered to how do you have healthy discussions with your child, not telling them what to do, but how do you have healthy discussions? And therefore you're leading and guiding that discussion as the parent. You're the disciple. The nice part is you already have a group leader, and you probably have a co-leader in your spouse, and you already have a small group, your children.
Your children.
Okay. So you don't even have to figure out what the group dynamics are. You already have them. And we can train up the parents in this workshop and resources and walk with you. We just don't drop you off. We stay with the church and partner with the church. We've done this for 15 years, 20,000 churches. And what we've done is walk with that church, because training without coaching is futile. And so we got to be consistent. And so we have coaches that consistently walk with your master family champions and help you develop this process within the DNA of your church. And so this is your church, not Victoria's family. We're just a partner to serve you. And we have resources that are proven. They've been used. We have bathed these resources over the decades, and they are effective. Now, here's a disclaimer to our resources I need to give you. We have borrowed these resources from 66 really good books. So we really can't take credit for the resources. We stole the resources. We borrowed them, and we just kind of tell that story.
Is there like a compact place where people can go and find these 66 books all collected in one place? Is that? I mean, that sounds pretty. When you say 66, that's a lot of books.
Yeah, it's his basic instructions before leaving this earth. It's called the Bible.
Oh.
Yeah, we kind of borrow from that book, which is our source, right? We got a lot of great books out there and a lot of great authors, and we certainly recommend that you read a lot of those things. But for us, we like to steal from the 66 really good books, and we found really good ones. And so we like to base everything we do is God honoring, Christ centered, and missional in scope. And we borrow from these great books, and it seems to work.
I like that. All right, I want to show your book one more time before we leave. Screen entire, and there we go. And there it is. And the link is below. Also, the link to his website so that people can get there and check you out. And we recommend they do that. I get confused sometimes. Too many buttons for me to handle all at once.
Yeah.
Now, let me give you this too, man. Very important.
All right.
This book is going to help you to kind of think through a process you can use at home and make it unique for you. My process may be different than your process and the next person. So what we're not proposing is that we all have the same process, okay? It's whatever unique for you and your children, because you guys are at different age and stage of your life.
Right.
You may have a different age of child and so forth. And some will say, well, my kids are out of the home. What do I do? Well, this works. I mean, our number 2 group that comes to our workshops are grandparents.
Right.
They're more involved. I mean, that shocked me how active our grandparents are, because they want to reach. But I'll simply say this to you. When we started this, I never thought the grandparents would take such a prominent role in this process, but they are in this process. And so this book gives you a framework, if you will. I like to imagine it like this. I like picture images. Imagine you have a smartphone And in that smartphone, they give you a few apps. They don't give you, and then you add and customize that smartphone for your lifestyle. Well, what we've done is we give you a few apps. We give you the kind of the framework, a few apps, and then you customize those apps based on age and stage of your child as to what fits your family. And we train you on how to use that smartphone and how to use those few apps and how to make it all work.
And how to modify them. I
Yeah.
did a little bit of a background on me. I started out in the trades as a drywall installer, drywall hanger, they called them in the day. And I went on then to train a dozen apprentices over the several years after that. And my process almost never deviated because it's how I learned. I start off with taking their hammer out of their hand and saying, "This is how you swing a hammer." That sounds odd because you think, "Oh, I know how to swing a hammer." No, most people swing a hammer with their arm, but if you're going to last through the course of a day, you need to learn how to swing it with your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's how to do it. Here's how to cut the end of your tube for your glue so you don't like get it all over the floor and you and everything else, right? And so as a process of showing them incrementally, here's how you do this, here's how you do that, and then introducing them to the next step, and in the process, introducing them to some other drywall hanger, because my process is this, they may be more comfortable imitating elements from somebody else. This is kind of like that. You have some basic tools that they're going to modify to suit them in how they're going to disciple their kids.
Yes. And you're critical, like you taught them the right methodologies, right? The right way to use that hammer. And he taught us as well. He said prayer, his word, and worship are the basic disciplines. And if we can really come down to mastering those things at home. And here's the point, less than 1% of Christians have any type of written spiritual development plan.
Right.
And I want you to get this. We're planners now. Don't mistake that, because what do? We have financial plans. We have estate plans. We have educational plans, where our kids are going to go to school, all this stuff. We even have vacation plans. We would never think to go on vacation without a plan. I mean, some people do, a rare 1%. But most of us plan our vacations.
Yeah.
But yet, less than 1% have a written spiritual development plan to be intentional. What if we can move that 1% to 10%, to 30%, to 40%? We're talking about, guys, 44 million parents in America, if we can move the number. Just to be intentional. Do you think that would make a difference in our society? If parents
absolutely. It absolutely would. And as you pointed out before, you have absentee fathers, not just those who are living there are kind of absent because they're tied up in their work, but you have homes where there are no fathers, and that's tragic.
That's right.
So anyway, before we get into that, it really is time to end this. I thank you so much for making the effort to join us again today. We're going to ask Ron to kind of waltz us out of here.
3/4. Okay, well, I don't know if this is in 3/4 time, but let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur, special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened. At least it hasn't happened yet.
Try.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we're going to wave.